How's it going, guys? Happy Halloween. Welcome to Onslaught Reviews. My name is Adam, and today we're talking about Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn. Alright, now, before we get into the movie real quick, I just want to say, freaking Halloween is probably one of my favorite times of year. Freaking the costumes, everything about it. It's fucking spooky as hell, and it's the one time of the year that my outside can properly reflect my inside. Which is, if you haven't noticed by now, it's dead inside. But anyway, so today we're talking about Evil Dead 2. Now, I've been watching this movie ever since I was a kid, freaking, this is one of the movies that I always pull out around this time of year, and honestly, I try to watch this movie at least 10 times a year, and it's that fucking good. So, without any further ado, let's talk about this classic. Alright. So one of the first things I really enjoy about this movie is the way they combine the kind of splatstick comedy nature of this movie and the really eerie, disturbing horror aspect of this movie, freaking it meshes together so well, and it was one of the first movies to do this, Back when Sam Raimi did the first Evil Dead movie, freaking he meant for the movie to be a very serious kind of horror movie. The only thing is, he didn't have the money to make it look the way he wanted it to look, so it's very cheap and kind of, very guerrilla-style filmmaking. And, all the actors, they can't really act too well. And that's, the same for Bruce Campbell at the time. Frickin', so when people saw this movie in theaters, they laughed, they thought it was funny, and frickin' he was like, oh, that's kind of weird. So that's when he got the idea to kind of rebrand this movie, or reboot it, rather, as kind of like a horror comedy. And frickin', it worked out so unbelievably well, frickin', like I said, this was one of the first kind of movies to do that frickin' mixture of, dark frickin', eerie and disturbing horror with, traditional kind of comedy and stuff like that, and basically slapstick comedy, creating splatstick, basically. And frickin', I commend this movie for that, frickin', like I said, it's one of the first movies to do that, and it holds the torch up so well for that category that it's hard to really frickin' get much better than that. Any kind of other horror movie that has that splatstick vibe is always going to be kind of compared to Evil Dead 2, because it was one of the first to do it, and it did it so well, it was just completely effortless with a movie like this, so I very much commend this movie for that, because it's just top notch. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is the effects. Even after 32 years since this movie came out back in the 80s, I really think that these effects hold up really well, and frickin', I know what some people will say, it's very cheap, it's cheesy, it's laughable, but honestly, I think that's the charm of this movie, it's to me, those effects are raw and frickin' real, and frickin' they're fucked up and dirty and disgusting, they don't have the polish of Hollywood to them, frickin', that's something to be said for classic horror like this, frickin', cheaper effects frickin' can make for some really awesome frickin' results, frickin', if you look back at some of these scenes, it looks like they used fucking just gallons and gallons of fake blood, and frickin' it looks, like I said, it doesn't look polished at all. When these people are frickin' dirtied up and disgusting, and when Bruce Campbell is fucking, just frickin' getting thrown around the frickin' building and shit, and frickin' he's, bloody and disgusting, it looks real. And frickin', for that, I commend him for that, because frickin', honestly, it's just awesome. It's hard to get much better than that when it comes to these kind of movies. And speaking of Bruce Campbell, frickin', this guy really holds up this movie on his fucking shoulders. And that goes, honestly, for all three of these movies. His acting, specifically in this movie, is just awesome. He throws himself into this character and throws himself around the fucking building so much. It's just awesome to see him work, and frickin', the kind of splastic performance he gives when he's throwing himself around the room and frickin', just being frickin' just naturally goofy, to the actual, like, emotional parts in this movie where he's frickin', he's fucking trying to survive and he's, fucked up because he had to fucking kill his girlfriend and shit like that, and all that shit. It works so well, and frickin', it really shows just how good of an actor Bruce Campbell is and why freaking he's such a legend in the horror community and why people fucking just love this guy. It's because he cares about what he does. It may not be the biggest movie, but he makes it bigger than life with his performances. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is a typical kind of trope in horror movies that's represented pretty on the nose here. The whole idea of, like, teenagers lost in the woods or, confined in a cabin in the woods, and something's always trying to kill them. You see it in freaking, movies like Friday the 13th and stuff like that. And, it's been a trope in horror movies for a long time. And I feel like a lot of people would say that that's probably a bad thing, that they need to move on to new things and new ideas. And, they're not completely wrong. But honestly, I think the whole idea of, people being lost in the woods or the cabin in the woods idea, I think is still viable. And the reason I think that is because if you look at, the old urban legends of the time and stuff like that, and freaking, just classic horror stories and stuff like that, a lot of people back in the day were living in cities and suburbs. And whenever you would hear, those classic kind of horror stories, those campfire tales and stuff like that, it always takes place in the woods because it's dark and it's spooky and it's unknown. And that's the thing that that's like the biggest thing in fear, is the fear of the unknown. Whether it's, a desolate desert though, or, the woods or something like that, when you're looking out there at night, you don't know what's out there. And especially in the woods, it's crowded, it's it's dense forested area, so you can't really see that much, maybe like 20 feet in front of you. You're always hearing stuff, crack, stuff, fluttering in the distance. You don't know what the fuck it is. There could be something in those woods looking right back at you, and you'd never fucking know it. And to me, that's kind of the essence of horror, is, being stuck somewhere that you don't know, it's dark, and it's spooky, and it's scary, and it gets you at your gut, Like I said, it's that fear of the unknown. When you stare at the abyss, sometimes the abyss stares back, and that's the thing that whether people want to admit to it or not, that's the thing that they're most afraid of. They can, talk about how they're afraid of sharks or whatever, but there's an innate fear of the unknown, and the fear of going into some, wild place and coming across something that you shouldn't, and it killing you. And to me, I think that's pretty well represented in movies like Evil Dead, and stuff like that. So, for me, it's one of those things that makes a movie like this even more timeless, because, it's a big fear, the fear of the unknown, that's it. Alright, I think I've rambled just about enough on this movie and gushed over every aspect of this movie. I honestly have no issues with this movie, so I think it's obvious that I'm going to give Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't seen this movie, you gotta go watch it right the fuck now. If you've seen it, go watch it again. You're gonna like it. Alright guys, that's it for me. I gotta wash this bullshit off my face so I can fucking go to bed. Again, happy Halloween. If you like what you see, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it's Adam_Onslaught1. And yeah, happy Halloween guys. See you in the next review.